All right, we are live this morning, Pastor Johnson over in Trinity, Manila, and I've got a very special guest, Pastor Bill Reedy from Concordia Seminary. And Bill, it's good to have you here. What's really funny is a few weeks ago we had Dr. Nielsen on, who's kind of responsible for kicking people out of seminary, and you're kind of the opposite role. And we'll get to that here in a second in terms of what you do at the seminary. But can you kind of tell us who you are and where you've served as a pastor?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I was born in Ludington, Michigan. If you're familiar with the west side of Michigan, I grew up on Lake Michigan. For those of you of a certain age, it was like growing up in Mayberry, RFD. It was definitely a simple time. We laughed that we were all trying to get out of town, and now all of us want to go back. So we'll see if that happens. Went to Concordia, Ann Arbor, college at that time, now university, and then took the scenic route to the seminary. I was actually an interpreter for the deaf, had tried seminary once and decided to quit. Finally came back and was ordained when I turned 40. And then my first call was to New York City. My call was to be mission field developer for the deaf. And I had 3 sites, one on Long Island where Milneck School for the Deaf is, and the Lutheran Friends for the Deaf, and also in Queens near LaGuardia Airport, and then one on 145th Street in Harlem, which is part of Manhattan, way up 145th Street.
So what was it like to move from Mayberry, more or less, to then going to New York City?
Well, it was one of those things. There used to be a salsa commercial that they made fun of the salsa when they looked at the label and it said made in New York City, and they said New York City. I don't think it really fully sank in until I had visited just very, very briefly as part of the call process, but also as just other times, and always with in tow, following somebody. So when I got, I think the mileage sign said 14 miles, New York City. That was the first overwhelming moment. And then driving, I had never, ever driven in New York City. Got quite good at it. I mostly took mass transit, but it was a culture shock. But the thing that helped was my mom was born in Detroit. We would go visit her 2 sisters every summer or sometime during the year. So I was exposed to the urban environment a few times, but it was pretty hilarious when I ended up moving there. And my sister would say it was about time because as a child, she used to have to walk me down to the railroad tracks to watch trains. And she thought it was hilarious that I now rode a train pretty much every single day of the week. So she said, finally, you're where you belong.
Sure. Very cool. Very cool. And then called to the seminary. And now you serve as the director of ministerial admissions and enrollment. Is that kind of technically the title? Is that right?
Oh, we love words, don't we? My initial call was to be an admissions counselor, which recruitment and admissions were just one and the same, which they really are. And things have morphed. We now have an associate provost, and the title over our combined areas is called enrollment. There's the admissions side that I do, and then there's a recruitment side that Pastor Micah Glenn is the director of. So you can't really draw a line between the two, but mostly I do intake.
Sure. So what is the process like of either somebody becoming a deaconess or a pastor? I guess let's start off with this. Are there any sort of things that have to be completed before you even step foot on campus?
Yes, and
I know the answer to that question.
Yeah, it depends. First off, we have to find somebody that's interested. So that's the hardest part, is the discernment. when somebody is thinking about becoming a pastor or a deaconess, or our greatest, if you will, weapon or our greatest tool is actually Sunday school teachers and grandparents and people that don't work full time and get a salary at the seminary. But once they've expressed an interest and are then within the year, the admission cycle for the year they wish to come, then two things that are first and foremost, you have to have a bachelor's degree.
Sure.
It can be in anything. What was your bachelor's, Pastor?
I was in history.
Okay.
So, yeah. I was I was just telling my Sunday school kids or my confirmation kids the other day, don't do that unless you're going to go to seminary, because again, you can be very diversified in terms of your bachelor degree. Otherwise, don't do history.
It's odd. We certainly do encourage what would be considered the classic liberal arts program, where you have a broad everything from the humanities, the arts, the philosophy, heavy on writing. So a very verbal program that requires you to read a lot, write a lot, especially if you're reading and writing at a level beyond kind of the basics, because the vocabulary in theological books, the discussions are so abstract and sometimes just, as you know, completely unique to studying theology, that the more you've wrestled with that in philosophy and literature, the better. Oddly, the only class we require, so you can be a chemical engineer, you can be a school teacher, you could be headed down any path. The only class we require is public speaking.
Sure. I can guess why.
Yeah, exactly. And our homiletics, our preaching department, very much requires that, because they don't want to teach you how to have presence and to be able to organize your thoughts and stuff. They need a little bit more going in. Then for everybody that comes, either if you come from a Concordia, so any of the 8 Concordias, and you take the Old Testament, New Testament, and Christian doctrine, you can be exempt from the exams, but everybody else gets to study substantial books that teach to the test. So it's not like you're reading things that have very little connection to the test. The authors of the books actually wrote the tests. And so you have to show basic proficiency in understanding the Old Testament, New Testament, and Christian doctrine. You have to get a C, a 70 on those exams, and you get 3 shots at it. We give you some tools along the way that let you know how you're doing if you don't pass the first time. But those are and we prefer, we have for a graduate school level education, our admission requirement is 2.5 in your undergrad.
Okay.
And I'll just insert there that we've had some interesting men come to the seminary, not so much the women, but the men who have not done so well in their undergrad. Yeah. And generally I'll start and see how they finished. Did they finish strong? And one gentleman who is now a pastor, and it's not Pastor Johnson. There is a guy who had a just below a 3-point, and I looked at his transcript, and he did so well his senior year, junior year, sophomore. Then I saw first semester of his freshman year, and he had a 0.9 GPA after his first semester. So that meant he had to work hard to get that low. And he was honest. He admitted that the freedoms and the opportunities in college were far more attractive than the studying. He kicked it into high gear from there on out. But boy, if you ever know somebody going to college that might be approaching it with a little bit of a cavalier, a little bit of they're not very serious, encourage them to take it very seriously. A strong GPA to start is easier to maintain than trashing your GPA and trying to build it back up.
Absolutely. I guess 2 follow-up questions. What would you encourage somebody with who is considering going to the seminary in terms of the discernment? What would you tell them?
To stay connected, and this is very easy unless for whatever reason they don't have a strong relationship with their pastor, and that could be because the pastor just took a call there, and so it's all relatively the relationship is new.
Sure.
But more than anything, it's kind of like when people can take their daughter or their son to work day, that if you can shadow a pastor,
sure,
because people still think that we work Sundays, or maybe it's Saturday, or maybe it's Christmas. But I believe that we really have a more oriented, somebody who is more ready for what's ahead if they've spent some time even just talking
sure,
with their pastor so that they know what they're getting into.
Sure.
Part of that too is for the pastor to sense, where is this individual? On a scale of 1 to 10, we usually say 1 to 5 being, just started thinking about being a pastor, but I may also be a teacher, up to 5. From 5 to 10, we think they're much more geared towards, I'm going to come to the seminary. It's a matter of when. And a pastor can really just influence that and help by what books are available, especially if the person wants to come to the seminary. They are going to have to read books. And one of them I recommend is actually by Gustav Wingren.
Okay.
It's Luther on Vocation.
Sure.
Which is a very good book for everybody because it points out that if you're a baptized child of God, you have a vocation. You are called as one of God's people, not necessarily to be full-time in church work as a teacher, DCE, or pastor. But and that kind of stuff is where a guided, if you will, discussion with their pastor is so important, because at one time he also had to figure out if God wanted him to be a pastor, and what does that mean?
Sure, absolutely. And so then maybe the follow-up question then is, you said your best weapon is Sunday school teachers and people that, you're not sending a royalty check to from the seminary or something like that. So how would you encourage Sunday school teachers, people in the church who see somebody who they see some of those baseline foundational gifts, talents, traits, whatever, to be in ministry? How would you encourage them to encourage that person?
More than anything is we're not looking only for the brightest and the best.
Sure.
We're looking for hearts.
Sure.
And so a lot of times Sunday school teachers and others will just see something. And it could be that they actually come to Sunday school, or they might come to confirmation and be engaged.
Sure.
They're more into it. They may also be the people that volunteer more, that if there's something happening at church, they tend to show up, whether it's to be a part of the youth group and go to a youth gathering, or as adults, who we certainly have about 40% of our incoming students are second career, who are the people that not only are church officers, but are there to shovel the sidewalk, or are the last one to leave because they're helping put up tables and chairs. Mm-hmm. People that have more of a, there's just some people that's their second home. They love being there. And you can see that in various ages. You just see the kid who volunteers. You can see the ones that when there's something going on at church, they will probably be involved with it. And that's just those relationships. Sunday school teacher, a person in the pew. Somebody said that his Sunday school teacher said, "I notice you sing all the hymns," which, as you probably know, some young people just, it's not that they can't sing, it's this little bit of defiance.
Yeah.
And
either they're praying or they're on their phone. I can never tell. It's always behind a pew. So
yeah, exactly. I always said that when cell phones became a bigger deal, especially with access to the internet and stuff, we had so many devout people who were always bowing their heads in prayer. Right. But you just get a sense. And I'm a big one on even when talking to the guy that wants to be a pastor, or a woman that wants to be a deaconess or explore it, that you can trust your guts. If you've had the ability to determine, should I or shouldn't I, the right and the wrong, the opportunity to challenge yourself, if you've practiced enough, that'll work very well when trying to discern whether you should go into full-time church work.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the reality is, I would say it's probably a very low percentage of people have an angel show up and say, church work or something like that. So it is surrounding yourself with people and moving forward, right? And getting that feedback from other people as well. So, well, we have some comments from people, and we've got Connie who says good morning. We've got
Good
Annette.
Morning, Connie.
Annette always gives us our cross, which is just always a great reminder. Karen says good morning as well.
Morning.
Gary says good morning, and again, I think Annette has. Thank you so much. You were awesome. So you did a good job. Don't let it go to your head, though. So,
well, this will carry me through the rest of the day. So,
good. Before we kind of close our time up together, this last week's gospel lesson was focusing on the Annunciation. So the angel Gabriel shows up and says, "Mary, FYI, you're going to be having a kid, and not just any kid, but the Son of God." And I guess whenever you encounter, or when you have encountered this text, what does it say about God? I guess we'll start off with that.
Well, a catchphrase that has become somewhat popular is God does not call the prepared, God prepares the called. So a lot of times people can get caught up in what they bring to the table. Are they hardwired to be a pastor, a deaconess? Do they have the academic ability? Sure. And just a quick advertisement for our academic resource center. Sure. We've realized that we have to be far more intentional about that for things to become possible, some people, because of their previous academic background or a disability or whatever, need that extra support, that extra insight into things. And that's where you realize it is possible for God to use this myriad bank of resources. Mm-hmm. And it's a matter of being much more like Isaiah, where Isaiah heard the voice of God, and which is, man, if that happens, that's just a pretty cool thing. But and his response was, "Here am I, send me, send me," sure. Which I think implies that he understood, even though it was before Luke wrote, that he understood that anything's possible because God is the one who called him. Mm-hmm. And that's why everybody's journey through life as a Christian, a baptized child of God, is going to be varied. Some people seem to have much more the favor of God because things go well, and others seem to be in the testing. But it's an amazing day when you see God's hand working in things, and you realize how possible it is for Sarah and Abraham, for the Virgin Mary to conceive and bear a son, which, if I can just interject a little bit of humor, my favorite Christian Christmas card shows several couples on camels, and one says, "My son is an honor student," and another says something else, and then there's one camel that says, "My child is God."
Nice. Yeah, it's pretty hard to beat that one.
Yep.
Last question for you. When it comes to Mary and her response, I mean, it's not just sort of the stoic, okay, we're good to go. I mean, there is this, how will this be? But then this response of faithfulness, "Behold, I am the servant of the Lord." How can Mary's response to this message inform our response as Christians and as baptized people of God?
I think it's amazing because we don't know because especially We know about Elizabeth and some of the support people around Mary, but
Mhm.
also realizing that being in the Mideast and all this, she probably had a fairly supportive, encouraging community around her. And I think that's the most vacant part of me right now, is the fact that we haven't been able to be in community as
Sure.
much as we have been. So
Sure.
I think as Mary offered herself in service, she also, whether she was actively thinking of it or not, she lived in community, and that community would support her and encourage her along her way.
Sure.
And it doesn't take long before she's telling Jesus what to do, whether it's changing the water into wine, or being angry at him when he disappeared from the caravan moving. So it's okay to be a bold Christian, and to put your best foot forward, but also to rely very heavily on God and the community He's placed you in.
Sure. Sure. Well, Bill, we appreciate your time this morning. We're disappointed that we couldn't have you come to the frozen tundra in January, but we appreciate your willingness. And maybe in the future we can have you on again, and maybe do an interview about what we were going to talk about then. But
Sure.
we appreciate you. We appreciate all that you do for the sake of the church, and bringing men and women into ministry. And we all hope you have a Merry Christmas. Really quick, any Zion Trinity members, the Christmas Eve stuff's been running at the bottom. If you got any questions, go to our websites, either at Zion or Trinity's websites, or just go to Google, because that's what everybody does, including me, or go to our Facebook pages to get more information. But Lord be with you, and thank you, and we'll see you all later.